Why? Why did this happen? That's the question I would like to examine with you. Why? To comprehend it, first we should look at the matter very narrowly, in narrow, limited terms of the national interest as crackpot realists and students of international relations have been defining it in this world of nation states. Looking at it even from the point of national interest and nationalism, I would argue with you that these explosions made no sense at all, either for India or Pakistan. First, I shall argue this position, that it made no sense at all. And then, yet again, there will remain the question of why. Why did they do it? And there will arise another question. Where do we go from there? For India, it's the bigger country. I will take it first. It made no sense at all. Consider India's greatest asset. In the 52 years that India has been independent, decolonized country, a member of the modern community of nations, its greatest international asset has been its image. Its image as an ancient civilization which produced Buddha, which produced Gandhi, which served as a model, philosophical model for people like Albert Luthuli of South Africa, or Bishop Tutu of South Africa, or Martin Luther King of the United States of America. And that country, with all its faults, all its failings, all its failures, all its poverty, continued to be viewed as somehow a beacon, a promise of a different kind of world, threw away in one go its greatest effort, the image of nonviolence. Its representation as a country that has stood for peace. Do the leaders of India know what they threw away? In this age, in modern times? Clearly, they do not. Or take its greatest burden, not only its greatest asset. The greatest burden of modern India is its poverty. It's a country now of roughly 1 billion people. Just a little short of 1 billion, maybe. Maybe not. Census has not been taken for 5 years or more. And we know by most estimates about 450 to 500 million people are living below the poverty line, which in India means that they do not have the 2,000 caloric intake necessary to keep the human body intact. 500 million people's children are being born with possible brain damage. That disadvantage, that much malnutrition. Nobody understands that. India, the seat of a great civilization, with a very large educated middle class, high level of scientific and technological knowledge, has over the last 45 years had remained stuck for 45 years with a low rate of growth at about 3.5 to 4%. Economists could not grasp this problem. People like Amartya Sen, who just received the Nobel Prize in Economics, said that this was the burden of poverty, this rate of growth. An uncomprehending economist started calling it the Hindu rate of growth, jokingly, as if there was no other explanation. Then, 5 years ago, equally mysteriously, India broke out of the Hindu rate of growth. And for the previous 5-6 years, it was showing a nearly 7% rate of economic growth. Foreign investment was pouring into India. Japanese and American and German corporations were moving into India. This year, India's rate of growth was predicted at 7.5 to 8.5%. And for the next 10 years, it was predicted to be a minimum of 7%, possibly up to 10% rate of growth. Then they explode this bomb. The expected happens. The Western countries and Japan clamped an economic sanctions on it, clamped an embargo, and this year, India's rate of growth is going to go back to the Hindu rate of growth, 4%. Why did they do it to themselves? So they threw away their greatest asset, and they refused to overcome their greatest liability at a time when they were actually overcoming it. Or take a third problem. India developed for itself in international relations an unnecessary, uncalled for, but a stupid problem in 1960s, early 60s. It got into a conflictual rivalry with China. It got into a war with China, and since then, its relations with China remained rotten. Now, you all recall that China is the biggest country in the world in population terms, more than 1 billion people. And India is the second biggest giant of the world, Asia, with about 1 billion people in the world. And these two giants were quarreling with each other. Then, 3 years ago, India and China had the wisdom to start normalizing their relations. I was in Delhi on November 28, 1997, when Jiang Zemin, the president of China, arrived in Delhi. And it was a festive occasion. This was the first visit of a Chinese head of state to India in 30 years. And the Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President signed agreements to improve relations between their two countries, including the reduction of forces along their long, large, thousands of miles of frontier. Mr. Jiang Zemin, President of China, came to Pakistan after India. Now Pakistan has been the old friend of China. India has always sided with Pakistan on its disputes. China has always sided with Pakistan on its disputes with India. But this time, the Chinese were advising Pakistanis, make peace with India. Even on Kashmir, from where our Ashraf Ali comes, make a settlement. Find ways to establish normal relations with each other. Then, this new government came to power. It's a fundamentalist Hindu nationalist government. And the first thing they did before testing their weapons to stop talking about the danger from China, as if their nuclear weapons will be tested against China. Thus, they threw away the greatest achievement of the previous government, Gujarat's government, which was to start normalizing relations with China. Today, by having exploded the bomb, India has entered into a deadly arms race with one of the fastest growing economies of the world. If India competes with China, India will meet the same fate as Russia met in competing on arms race with America. You can go blank. I will come back later on Pakistan. We are running the same danger in relation to India. You are with me?
Yes.
Yes? So there they ruined their third achievement. India has now entered into an arms race with China. Or take fourthly, we all know, and it is completely comprehensible, that is a big Asian power. 1 billion people, enormous resources, large intelligentsia, a huge middle class, highly developed infrastructure, etc., etc., etc. India has ambitions to play the role of a major power, at least in the region. We all also know that to be a major power on world scale or at a regional scale, you have to be acceptable. You have to have the consent. You have to have the respect of your neighbors. If neighbors don't like you, you ain't nobody in the neighborhood. That's the simple fact of life. Now, India already had an ongoing dispute with Pakistan. And it already had, under the Gujarat government, it started to improve its relations with the other neighbors, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and then they followed along. The bomb has scared the hell out of everybody. And you know why? South Asia is an ecological unit. South Asia is one ecological unit divided into 4 nation states. If a bomb goes off, the radiation will reach everybody. If India bombs Pakistan or Pakistan hits India, Bangladeshis will die, Nepalis will die, Sri Lankans will die. The wind blows every which way. I mean, therefore they are all angry. And they all see the Indian bomb as a weapon of bullying. What do they want it for? What do they want it for? Says the Bangladeshi. What do they want it for? Says the Sri Lanka. What do they want it for? Says the Nepalis. Why do it? Why frighten your neighbors? Why do that? Or anyway, one could go on. I don't want to waste too much of your time. The question then arises, why did India go nuclear? Makes no sense. I've only given you 4 points for this showing. It makes no sense. Why did they do it? And there you begin to understand the world a little bit, the world we live in. First of all, India, like America, and earlier like the Soviet Union, and earlier like France, Indian political leaders view nuclear weapons as a currency of power. It's a currency of power and prestige in this world of nation states. And that's why France went nuclear. That's why the British insisted, we cannot be proper cousins with you, meaning with the Americans. Cousinship requires that we too share these weapons with each other. It's a currency, it's viewed as a currency of power. The way in which the gunpowder was viewed as a currency of power in the 17th century, or the battleship came to be viewed as a currency of power in the 19th century. To recall to you Henry Kissinger's wonderful line, nuclear weapons, in our time, nuclear weapons are the modern equivalent of showing the flag. Those are the actual sentence I'm quoting from Kissinger. Nuclear weapons are the modern equivalent of showing the flag. Display of nuclear weapons. You know what he meant by it. Battleships used to show the flag. When you didn't like the Latin American government, American Navy used to parade up and down. And the other side sort of saw the point. So there is this view of nuclear weapons as a weapon for projecting power, as a primary element of projection of power. And the United States, quite unfortunately, has continued to provide a model for treating nuclear weapons as the primary element of power, even after the Cold War has ended. During the Cold War, there was a certain kind of justification being offered by the theorists. We are in battle between the evil empire and us. There is a war between democracy and totalitarianism. There is a war between communism and freedom, blah, 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 blah. When that's all over, the United States has continued, although its officials do not acknowledge the fact. I'll give you a few facts about it. First of all, the START II treaty. Nobody's stupid, they all read. They're not wise, but they're not stupid. So they read the fine print of the START II treaty. It gives the United States superiority over all other powers or group of powers. The United States has 350, believe it or not, 3,500 nuclear warheads, all of which are functional. The United States has, the Russians in principle have 3,000 warheads, only a small amount of which are by now functional because their army is not functioning. The systems are declining. But more importantly, the United States-Russian agreement of the fall of 1991 on the elimination of tactical nuclear weapons as battlefield weapons from Europe has left the United States with battlefield capability. Because, one, its F-111 bombers are still based in UK and are still equipped with nuclear warheads. And two, now, since last year, the United States has provided Israel with the same capability as it now holds for itself in UK. In other words, an air-to-ground battlefield capability which keeps totally intact its graduated response capability throughout the world, with a global outreach, while denying such a capability to everyone else. In this situation, the United States has started expanding its nuclear outreach by the expansion of its navy. And this naval expansion reached the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf during the years 1990 and 1993. 1990, the Gulf War took American capabilities throughout the Middle East. And then the bases from Diego Garcia have taken the outreach of the American Navy all over. Now, some of you might have noticed that the American government quite cleverly invited the Indian Navy to join in the naval exercises that the American Navy was carrying out in the Indian Ocean. But joining somebody else's exercise can whet your appetite rather than calm you down. So in other words, I am pointing out to you that the international environment of counting nuclear weapons as a currency of power not only remained, but was in some ways and in some areas, such as the Middle East and South Asia, this perception was accentuated. by American policies was accelerated, augmented by American policy. Thirdly, the United States declared a moratorium on testing in 1992. We were all very happy that America has now finally decided that it will not carry out nuclear tests anymore. Then slowly, we all began to realize, they all began to realize, not I shouldn't say we, I mean, not me, that this wasn't happening. Tests would be carried out. Two things happened. One, by commissioning extremely powerful supercomputers, the United States acquired the capability to simulate tests. Now, those computers are not available to Pakistan and India. So it was able to start simulating a whole lot of new tests without anybody being able to detect it. And secondly, they had the technological prowess to carry out small-scale tests and yet get enough results. Now, the Atomic Energy Commission, the world, what is called IATA, the International Atomic Energy
Agency.
Help me.
Agency.
International Atomic Energy, for example, asked the United States and has not received replies to the effect that it detected at least 15 such tests, underground tests, in 1996 alone. And many more may not have been detected. Therefore, the big superpower, which now has no other rival left, was actually violating its own precepts, its own non-proliferation policy, its own declarations of stopping testing while asking others not to do so. More importantly, the United States non-proliferation policy, which is partially successful, because after all, Algeria decided not to test. Brazil gave up its nuclear research facilities, weapons facilities. South Africa dismantled its nuclear weapons after Mandela came into power. So in a sense, America's non-proliferation policies have had some success, and yet they have not been even policies. They have not been honest policies. They have been marked with hypocrisy and internal and violations. For example, I have mentioned to you already the expansion of America's all-nuclear power into the Gulf and the Indian Ocean. I should also mention the fact that the United States has not only looked the other way and not protested, nor imposed any sanctions on Israel for developing nuclear weapons, whose existence we all know and threatens everybody, but more importantly, they have actually provided Israel with the most modern, advanced delivery capabilities, including, most recently, the F-11 aircrafts. These examples have not been reassuring to those who take nuclear weapons seriously as a currency of power. Finally, two more factors should be, and before I go to the next factor, I should give you my views on the issue. My views are that we should not take nuclear weapons seriously as a currency of power. This view of seeing nuclear weapons as a component of power is an outdated, stupid, Kissingerian view of the world and of nuclear weapons, which has nothing to do with real life strategic considerations. Let me show you why. It was a coincidence of some sort that the rise of America, the emergence of America as a superpower after World War II, coincided with the development by Americans of nuclear weapons. Once that coincidence had occurred, and the United States had actually used nuclear weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and nuclear weapons became a major aspect of the arms race between the Soviet Union and the United States, it came to be seen as a component of power. But then two things happened. The two things happened which the colonized minds in India and Pakistan did not register. Cuba, without nuclear weapons, obtained its liberation in the teeth of opposition from the United States. And American nuclear weapons were of no use in stopping Castro's rise to power. It was no use in ending Castro in power either. Okay. You can explain Cuba away. You can explain Cuba away by saying, well, the Cubans had the protection of another nuclear power, the Soviet Union. And that protection was kind of demonstrated in a backhanded way in the Cuban Missile Crisis. So an argument can be offered that no, nuclear weapons remained an important component of power because Cuba would not have survived if it did not have the protection of the Soviet Union. You see my point? I lose. But Vietnam, hallelujah. Vietnam fought a war. Americans repeatedly, in one negotiation, 13 times, they told me, Kissinger threatened to use nuclear weapons. And they come and say, go ahead, do it. We'll see. Then, in case it is seen, in case the Vietnamese are counting on Russian protection, Kissinger and Nixon did something extraordinary, which has been forgotten by a lot of analysts. Those of you who were alive and remember that moment, the Christmas bombings, will you please recall that Richard Nixon was going to Moscow. He was scheduled to go to Moscow to meet with Brezhnev as part of the American-Soviet détente. And 5 days before going to Moscow, he started the Christmas bombing of North Vietnam. I had at that point argued, look, and a lot of newspapers, everybody said, he shouldn't have been doing it now, because now the meeting between Soviet Union and Washington will be cancelled. I had argued, look, what the Americans are doing is delinking Soviet-American relations from a war of national liberation. What they are doing is to make sure that they have taken a risk. If Soviets receive them, then the Soviets are saying to Vietnamese, you are alone. You're on your own. We'll give you what help we can in material terms, but you can't get between in the relationship between us and the other superpower. Delinking fully occurred, and Vietnam defeated America. First defeat in American history. I should give you a third example. I was sitting, this is some years ago, it's an illustrative example. I was sitting with the American ambassador, who was at that time a man called Robert Oakley in Pakistan. I went to interview him about Afghanistan. And as he was talking to me, it dawned on me that he actually talks about Pakistan the way the British Viceroy used to talk about each other. I said to him, you know, Mr. Oakley, you are the Viceroy here. So he kind of looked very pleased. Now he said a lot of people think that, but really I have no power over here, etc., etc. And I said, no, Bob, actually it's much worse than that. You have power and it's totally hollow. He said, what do you mean? I said, come with me to the window. I took him out to his window of his office. And I said, look out in the streets there. He said, yes. I said, what do you see? He said, I see what you see, cars. So I said, now please count. Is there a single American car there? He said, no, they're all Japanese. So I said, that's the point. They got the power, you have the image. That's it. The Japanese are there in our homes through their television. Our cars are Japanese, our television is Japanese, our gadgets are Japanese, our aid is more Japanese than American right now, and you keep thinking that you are a big guy because you have nuclear weapons and you got the image of the big power, and you're viceroy. It's broken, it's gone. And he looked at me, he said, it takes an American to see this so clearly. I said, no, man, it takes a radical to see it so clearly. But the point I'm making is, in our time, something new has happened. That is to say, there has been a de-linking. For the first time in the history of the world, there has been a de-linking of economic power and military powers. Today, there are three major economic powers: the United States, Japan, Germany, and 4 or 5 that come immediately after that. The weight of all the 4 or 5, plus these 2, other than America, is much greater than of America economically. And none of them are military powers. Japan and Germany certainly aren't. Given that delinking, what the hell are the Indians and Pakistanis going for? Their minds are colonized. They should see differently. So all I was saying is that I don't agree with that, but their perception is still a colonial perception, 19th century perception of the linkages between power, military power, and power. 2 last points to be made for why India tested. The end of the Cold War ended a perceived balance of terror in which non-nuclear nations felt that they were secure because one power couldn't use nuclear weapons on them without risking retaliation from the other. Each of the third world countries felt, including India, that we had a nuclear umbrella of one power or the other. That in this bipolar world, there won't be new use of nuclear weapons by a nuclear power on a non-nuclear country. The end of the Cold War has removed that perception. And that perception has become stronger with the American refusal to sign a world treaty that would say, as a nuclear power, it will never use nuclear weapons on non-nuclear countries. Do you know the US refuses to sign such a paper? It has made no declaration, multilateral or unilateral, that it will not use nuclear weapons on non-nuclear countries. And yet, it asks countries not to become nuclear. You see the unevenness I'm talking about. And finally, their race with Pakistan had accelerated. The Indian government made a very bad mistake 3 years ago by developing and then deploying a missile system called Prithvi, which is a Pakistan-specific missile system capable of carrying nuclear warheads. When they deployed the damn Prithvis all around the border, the Pakistanis got more serious about developing their own missile system. They got into the arms race. And thus began a missile arms race in the subcontinent. Now, in April of this year, it all happened this year, isn't it? In April, Pakistan tested its new missile system called Gauri with a range of 1,000 miles. The Indian government could not believe that the Pakistanis had developed a missile system with such a range. I was in Delhi at the time and interviewed a number of government officials, including some of the leaders of the BJP, which is now the ruling party. Their perception was that the Chinese have held Pakistan. Therefore, the Chinese are kind of catching them from the back. And this could have encouraged them to go ahead and test their own weapons. And absolutely finally, India has been fighting an insurgency in Kashmir, which is an Indian-held territory. And it has a conviction that this insurgency will end only when Pakistan stops aiding the insurgents. It had an expectation that if it explodes its bomb, it might frighten Pakistan enough to stop its support of Kashmiri insurgents. That would partly explain the fact that 3 days after testing their nuclear device, Mr. Lal Krishna Advani, who is the Home Minister of India, Minister of Interior, publicly said Pakistan must now understand that the strategic equation has changed in India's favor and it must stop supporting the insurgency in Kashmir. And 6 days later, Mr. Advani made statements to the effect that India might invade Pakistan to punish it, all of which merely frightened the Pakistanis even more. These were probably the reasons for India to go at it. But now we are in it. We are in it full scale. And Pakistan went at it, as you know, on May 29, 1998. Among many other people, and I want to stress the among many other, because the New York Times had a story that seemed to imply that I was alone in Pakistan in opposing these weapons, but I was not. A lot of more people, a lot more eloquently, including some former Army and Air Force officers, opposed the idea of Pakistan testing. But the Pakistanis waited for about 11 days with hesitation and then tested. I had argued, don't do it, for a number of reasons. First of all, everybody knew that Pakistan had some nuclear capability. And everybody knows that it's a smaller, weaker of the two countries. So I argued with them on strategic ground, for God's sake, don't do anything. Because as Sun Tzu, the great Chinese strategist of 2,000 years ago, had argued, when there is such a situation between a weak power and a smaller country, the weaker one, between a strong power and a weak country, the weaker one doesn't show its weapons. You're better off not demonstrating your strength. Why bother? My second argument was that this is not a currency of power, which I have argued with you. My third argument was that our real challenge was economic. And we are going to be hit badly. There is going to be sanctions. India is a big country, it can absorb sanctions. We are a small, poor country, we will not be able, and we are also more connected to the bloody international market than India. We will get badly hit, and that's what has happened. And my final argument was that militarization of society hurts its culture, its politics, its way of life. Don't ruin it. We are already badly hit, badly ruined. Why do further? So now the sanctions have come. We are in what? The 6th month of sanctions now, right? And it's hurting like crazy. And the country is turning more and more towards the right. So much more towards the right that the last 3 days I have had emails from friends saying, don't return for a while, when they are that scared. And it's the direct result of the militarization and turning the country more towards the right. India is also going the same way, but because it is larger, it is able to absorb. So, two questions arise. And that's with those I will take with you. The first is what's happening now, and the second is how to look at the future. On what is happening now, I want to say this to you. Not among anybody in this audience, but I found in New York and Washington a tendency on the part of people, informed people, policy-making people, to say, you guys can't handle these weapons. Oh, that's pure racism. That is poppycock. The truth is, nobody can handle weapons. Don't tell yourself that some bloody white men in gray suits can handle the weapons better than some non-wise men in khadi clothes, hand-woven clothing can't handle it. This is nonsense. The weapon is evil. It shouldn't exist. It ought to be eliminated globally. And don't talk about it to me regionally. I'm opposed to the Pakistani and Indian weapons because I'm there now. I oppose to the Indian American weapons because then I'm here now. It's not a regional issue. It's a global problem. And it should be addressed globally. Number one. Number two, I'm happy to inform you, which may surprise you a little bit, that by comparison with America and Europe, maybe because there is this time lag, there is more of an anti-nuclear movement in South Asia 1 year after the first test than there was in the Western world 20 years after the first tests. No comparison between your movement and ours. May I cite? First of all, I've said to you, this the Times story of, Eqbal Ahmad is the lone dissenter in Pakistan. What the bloody bullshit. It wasn't. He isn't. But I'll give you 3 examples. Hiroshima Day was August 6th of this year. I was neither in Pakistan nor India. I was already in the United States. But I read in the newspapers and on the web that on the August 6th demonstrations against nuclear weapons, 250,000 people turned out in Calcutta. And 30,000 people turned out in Delhi. And led by among others, a rather smallish and beautiful young woman named Arundhati Roy, the novelist. And in Pakistan, which is a smaller country, there are about 2,000 people in Karachi, 1,000 in Lahore. And I'm ashamed to tell you, only 250 in Islamabad. But such is life. What I'm trying to say is there is an anti-nuclear and peace movement in that country, in those 2 countries, earlier, 20 years earlier than they were here in this country. So things are not that bad after all. I would like to give you a second example. I read on the web a few days ago that 50 officers of the defense services of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh have signed a statement against the 2 countries possessing nuclear weapons. The statement reads in part, the following quotation: by virtue of our experience and the positions we have held in the armed forces, we have a fair understanding of the destructive parameters of conventional and nuclear weapons. We are of the considered view that nuclear weapons should be banished from the South Asian region, and indeed from the entire globe. Quotes closed. The signatories of this statement include a former Pakistani chief of the Air Force, Air Marshal Dr. Chaudhry, another chief of the Pakistani Air Force, Air Marshal Asghar Khan, the outgoing chief of the Indian Navy, Admiral L. Ramdas, and the chief of the Indian Army Staff, Lieutenant General Gurmeet Maan Singh. You can't get more senior officers, such senior officers, even in this country, to make such a statement. General Butler is an exception, and a very late one. So things were not as bad, perhaps, as they look on paper. Where do we go from here is the next question. First thing I want to say is that sanctions did not work before and will not work now. Pakistan was under severe sanctions from the United States. Sanctions imposed against building nuclear weapons and against testing for 8 years. It got away with it and defied it. Sanctions won't work and will not last, also because these are not countries a superpower looking for opportunities can ignore. Pakistan is too strategic for the United States, for the wild grab in which it is so interested in Central Asia. And India is too big a market for it to be ignored. So the quicker they take the sanctions off, the better they are, and we are. The second is that the arms race has begun in Asia, which includes China and India now, and Pakistan. And my great fear is that within years, the United States, which has now fed the sanctions, imposed the sanctions, will be feeding the arms race. It will be feeding the arms race because it needs India to balance China. And its old view of the world, balancing the search for balance of power politics, the seeking for balancing mechanism, it would want to use a nuclear India as a balancing mechanism against nuclear China. Already, certain elements, I don't have time to go into that, powerful elements in American society are making that argument. We have to fight against that phenomenon. And my last point is that there is a risk of nuclear holocaust between India and Pakistan as long as India and Pakistan remain enemies of each other, adversaries of each other. Therefore, the only security we have to remove this threat from our lives and from the world is to seek peace between India and Pakistan. There is one major bone of contention, and that is Ashraf and his country, his people, his state called Kashmir. We have to find a resolution to this dispute. Both India and Pakistan are stuck in old positions. They cannot be moved without international pressure. That pressure has to be built on both countries.